Jialiang, and our group's question is, what are the economic impacts of globalization on Singapore? Globalization is a process whereby an increased portion of economic or other activity is carried out across national borders. With globalization accelerating the interflow of ideas, new industries have been emerging. In order to remain competitive, the Singaporean government has invested a lot in opening new sectors in its economy to insulate against sector-specific shocks caused by foreign demand cycles. In recent years, we have been plunging into new industries such as research and development (R&D), in line with Singapore's aim to effect a paradigm shift to a knowledge-based economy, thus promoting itself as a global hub for business, enterprise, innovation, and talent. In this section, we'll take a closer look at how this has impacted the Singaporean economy. For a very long time in the past, Singapore's economic success was attributed to the electronics manufacturing sector, with cheap labor, stable political environment, good infrastructure, and strategic location. Huge multinational corporations like Philips began setting up assembly plants here. Very soon, more and more multinational corporations were attracted here, bringing in huge amounts of foreign direct investments, FDI, and practically transformed Singapore from a third world to a first world nation within a matter of years. However, with the spurt in economic growth came higher living standards, and workers started demanding for higher wages. This drove production costs up, and companies started looking elsewhere for cheaper labor. At around the same time, the 1997 Asia economic crisis struck, and Singapore felt the jolt. Together with a slump in global demand for electronics, the crisis caused the government to re-evaluate its strategies and rethink them. The Economic Reviews Committee, ERC, came out with a report in 2002 and succinctly put it that the phase is over and the days of heady double-digit growth are behind us. They then put forth a set of radical plans that would transform the very nature of our economy. What they envisioned was a diversified economy with various sectors focused in areas like healthcare, education, tourism, science and technology, and an entrepreneurial workforce that valued creativity, innovative ideas, risk-taking. Already, we have seen many of these changes. We now have facilities such as the Agency for Science, Research and Technology, commonly known as A*STAR, the Institute for Molecular and Cell Biology, IMCB, and the ambitious One North project. The government has poured a substantial amount into the R&D sector and will continue to do so. Gross expenditure on R&D was 2.77% in 2008, or 7.5 billion, has been allocated to the Ministry of Trade and Industry (MTI) for the financial year 2006 to 2010 to strengthen Singapore's R&D capabilities. The development budget for A*STAR in 2010 was 1.24 billion, which is quite a substantial amount. This atmosphere has also attracted top science and technology companies such as GlaxoSmithKline and Rolls-Royce to set up branches here, bringing in tons of FDI and recreating the MNC attracting situation similar to that of the early years. Despite these benefits, this might also cause structural employment, which is a mismatch of the skills of the workers and the required skills needed by the particular economy. As such, the government would have to change a portion of its education system, which would cost quite a lot of money, as well as retrain its workers, which would add on to this cost, as well as social instability, as some people might be unhappy about these changes. Well, apart from that, the focus has not only been on the global top dogs. Local small and medium enterprises, SMEs, have been getting a leg up from the government too. Many funding projects have been implemented, such as the 75 million Technology Enterprise Commercialization Scheme or the Special Risk Sharing Initiative, SRI. All of these have contributed to the massive 8.4 billion of new loans which the government is expecting to dole out by January 2011 since December 2008. Around 13,000 SMEs will benefit from this. This is also in accordance with the aim to nurture an innovative workforce with an entrepreneurial attitude to complement the turn in the direction of the economy. Many SMEs will of course not succeed, but thanks to the funding, projects, and a more encouraging business environment than in the past, there is a high possibility that they will. This will lead to the emergence of new areas and add to the diversity of the economy. The thousands of SMEs will also greatly stimulate the economy by providing more multipliers in the economy. The multiplier effect hinges on the notion that producers are consumers as well. With the government planning to pump in more money into the SMEs, aggregate expenditure should increase, leading to a higher multiplier in the economy. With this greater flow of money, purchasing power generally increases, thus increasing consumption. This in effect increases the gross domestic product, GDP, of Singapore. Now going on to trade. Globalization has made Singapore's economy more open than it ever was, and now we can observe some of the impacts from this. In this section, we will be examining the various advantages and disadvantages of globalization with regards to the trade sector of Singapore. Notably, globalization has reduced many barriers and obstacles that Singapore has faced through various policies adopted by the Singaporean government. Singapore adopted the Free Trade Agreement in the face of globalization so as to remain competitive in the global economy. A Free Trade Agreement is a legally binding agreement between two or more countries to reduce or eliminate barriers to trade and facilitate the cross-border movement of goods and services between the territories of the countries involved. Singapore first signed her first Free Trade Agreement in 1993, the ASEAN Free Trade Agreement. The ASEAN Free Trade Agreement effectively paved the way for more free trade agreements. Today, Singapore possesses more than 18 regional and bilateral free trade agreements with 24 trading partners. These 18 free trade agreements include the New Age Economic Partnership Agreement, which involves Japan and Singapore. And one between India and Singapore would be the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement. Free trade agreements have various advantages to be noted. They have been instrumental in helping Singapore-based businesses strengthen cross-border trade by eliminating or reducing import tariff rates, providing preferential access to service sectors, easing investment rules, improving intellectual property regulations, and opening government procurement opportunities. With this, it effectively means that free trade agreements cause Singapore to be more trade-centered than before, adhering to Singapore's aim to become a global hub where many different transactions will take place to compensate our lack of natural resources. With the increase in our balance of payment, BOP, Singapore's economy will experience positive growth, which is one of the economic goals that Singapore aims to achieve. However, this will mean that Singapore will become reliant on its trade sector, which is not exactly a good thing. This is because it will mean that Singapore will be more affected by the world's economic status. For example, the subprime mortgage crisis, which originated in the United States of America, resulted in many countries shunning away from international trade and trying to focus more on getting domestic consumers to purchase domestically produced goods. for countries like Singapore that possesses such a big portion of its GDP being in current account balance, these measures adopted by these countries will have drastic results on Singaporean-like economies. This is especially so when the government of Singapore Investment Corporation, GIC, and a Middle East investor pumped 11.7 billion of fresh capital into UBS by agreeing to subscribe to a mandatory convertible bond. Merrill Lynch had received at least 4.4 billion from Singapore's state-run Temasek Holdings during the subprime mortgage crisis. This shows that Singapore was indeed paranoid of the drastic consequences that would follow after the subprime mortgage crisis and attempted to deter the effects. However, all of the measures appeared to be futile as Singapore sunk into a 6.3% GDP contraction in Q3 of 2008. This means that Singapore faces more problems when recessions occur and with unemployment being one such impact, as labour is a form of derived demand in the economy. When the aggregate demand of the country falls due to a contraction of its gross domestic product, the demand for labour falls subsequently and the country experiences a spiral of problems. On the other hand, with a decrease in trade barriers, it would mean that more trade can take place with the same budget. Thus, more transactions can be completed and the country benefits economically. Using the same reasoning of Singapore having a large portion of its GDP being account balance, a constant increase in trade in the absence of the global economic crises will allow the Singaporean economy to flourish significantly faster than that of other countries and would thus allow Singapore to be more competitive. The increase in GDP due to lessened trade barriers will increase employment in the country as labour is once again a form of derived demand in the market. With increased employment, there is lesser debt rate on the Singaporean economy and even more growth can be achieved. Aside from employment, more growth would also mean that there would be a higher standard of living for Singaporeans as their income per capita would have increased and thus they will be able to afford greater and better healthcare, education and other necessities which should allow them to enjoy life better. However, if this growth is uncontrolled, inflation might occur. Singapore's inflation rate in July 2010 was 3.1%. If this inflation rate is uncontrolled, it will eventually mean that Singaporeans will face even more problems. The goods in Singapore may lose their price competitiveness, this is especially so the Singaporean goods have high import content and the profits earned would thus be diminished. This may thus negatively affect our country's balance of payment. It is not far-fetched to say that inflation may cause a recession in Singapore if it goes uncontrolled. In conclusion, by diversifying our economy, we have avoided over-specialization and as a result have avoided being held hostage by the demand cycle of just one country or just one industry. This has also provided insurance against the global economic downturn, as seen as how Singapore was able to weather the recent financial crisis. As such, globalisation has forced many countries to radically restructure their economy, and it can be plainly seen in Singapore's situation. And as for the aspect of trade, we can see that trade has allowed Singapore to grow economically, but we can also see that too much trade can lead to inflation and if uncontrolled to cause a recession. With that, we have come to the end of our presentation. Thank you for your kind attention.